This took place a while ago, 2015-ish, but I'll probably never forget it. I, around 21 at the time and female, was still fairly new in my city. I had just gotten out of a bad relationship, wasn't in the best place mentally, and didn't know a lot of people in town besides my ex and his friends. I was on a dating and hookup app looking for people to hang out casually with. Maybe find a friends with benefits or something. I had matched with a 25-year-old guy named Simon. We had talked sporadically in the app for a few days. He explained he was in a band and living in a house with his bandmates. He sent me their music. It was just audio on YouTube with a heavily edited still image of 4 or 5 guys playing rock instruments. One of them looked like him. The music was an interesting combination of styles, but not really for me. But whatever. He seems like a nice enough guy. He stopped replying for a few days, and I figured that was that, then moved on. Then one day I was at work and I got a message from him saying sorry that he'd been so busy and inviting me to a barbecue with his friends and bandmates in their yard. He had explained that their band manager was providing them the house to live in. Based on the lack of views on the YouTube video and the fact that I had only saw one photo of him playing in the band, I figured that he was probably exaggerating the band manager thing. I thought it was more likely something along the lines of a bar manager friend giving them a discount on rent in exchange for being a house band at their bar or something, and didn't think much of it beyond that. Normally, I would have just said no to going to a barbecue alone at the home of someone that I really didn't know. But I was really bored, and I figured that I might be able to overcome some social anxiety, and maybe even make some female friends there since he made it sound like a pretty big party. I put the neighborhood he gave me into maps, and it was a suburban area with lots of families as far as I knew. I figured being in a yard on such a nice summer day wouldn't be overly risky because lots of neighbors would be outside. Plus, it was just a few train stops away from my workplace, and I was off in a few hours. I did tell him I wasn't overly comfortable with the idea since I didn't know him very well, but I would stop by for a bin if I didn't need to go inside the house at all. He said that was totally fine, which made me feel a lot better. I even made sure not to drink anything for the rest of my shift so I wouldn't be risking needing to go inside to use the bathroom. I was anxious about showing up to a barbecue with people I didn't know at all, as he implied that the event was already underway. Plus, I would have had a hard time finding a specific address from the backyard side. So I asked Simon if he could meet me at the train station since he said it was a quick walk away. He agreed to do that, and I let him know when I was leaving work and what time maps said that the train would get to a station. I sent Simon a message to tell him that I had arrived at the train station at around 5:30 after I'd looked around and couldn't find him. He told me that he was running behind and to just start walking toward the neighborhood. I was about halfway across the massive train station parking lot when I saw him slowly wandering toward me. I recognized his clothes. Wearing bell-bottoms when they were not common, especially for men, and long hair from far away, but up close his face looked pretty different from his photos. It might have been some heavy-duty editing, I don't even know, but he kinda looked like a different guy. Older looking than the 25-year-old guy in the photos by 5 to 10 years. Maybe he used photos of his brother or something, I don't even know. This was also before AI. This was the first real red flag, but I brushed it off. Maybe he's just self-conscious. Maybe he smokes a lot and doesn't wear sunscreen and hasn't taken any pictures in a while. All of his pictures look candid, so I figured he wasn't much of a selfie guy. And besides, I'm mostly here to make friends anyway, so I shouldn't judge his appearance so harshly. He was also clearly already drunk. But a lot of my ex's friends were heavy drinkers, so that didn't seem strange. He is hosting a barbecue after all. The second red flag came shortly after when we arrived at the front door. I reminded him that I wasn't comfortable going inside the house, but he assured me we would just have a walkthrough to get to the backyard. Okay, fine. It wasn't the kind of neighborhood where you could just walk around the house to get to the backyard. We would have had to backtrack to the main road to go down the alley directly to the backyard. I figured he just forgot what I said about not wanting to go inside and I didn't want to cause a bunch of trouble, so I went with it. We got in the house, and he immediately closed the door and locked the deadbolted knob right behind me. I didn't think that was too weird since nobody was hanging out inside, and a lot of people are just in the habit of locking the door whenever they come in, but it did still give me the heebie-jeebies for some reason. Then Simon told me that he'd really like to give me a tour of the house. I politely declined and reminded him that I was just there for the barbecue. He said that he and his bandmates had worked really hard to get the house, and he was really proud of it. At that point, I was getting really skeptical, because usually when guys would tell me things that seemed a bit far-fetched, they'd let the truth slip by the time they got me to their house. But still, I convinced myself that I was just being unreasonable. I was already in the stupid house anyway. He insisted it would be quick. Not the wisest choice, I know, but I was pretty good at explaining away red flags. So at this point, Simon still mostly had a dopey stoner art guy kind of vibe as far as I was concerned. He really didn't seem like a threat, just an insecure oddball who sucks at communicating and fibs a bit. Not unlike my ex, who was definitely emotionally and verbally abusive, but it never escalated past that. I figured at worst he'd get handsy and I'd get called a prude for not sleeping with him. I didn't have a lot of self-worth at the time, obviously, so I went with it. The tour started pretty uneventfully, other than that the decor in the common areas was obviously chosen by a middle-aged Martha Stewart enthusiast, and not a bunch of guys in a band or their fake band manager. I didn't know if this should make me feel better or worse. On one hand, he was clearly lying, but on the other, it made me think that it was probably just someone's mom's house, and she was out of town and he didn't want to tell me that he lived at home, and that he didn't actually have a paying job. Again, total red flag, but I could rationalize it at the time. The bedroom doors were all closed. The bathroom was unremarkable. He then showed me the kitchen, and I finally saw through the window, and that there was nobody in the backyard. There weren't even barbecue supplies around. No burgers thawing on the counter, no cocktail supplies lying around, nothing. I asked him where everyone was and why he lied about the barbecue, and he told me that his bandmates were still on tour. They were just running behind due to van trouble, but they should be back any minute so we could start the party. I asked him why he wasn't on tour with them if he's in the band. I don't even remember what his answer was to that, because it didn't make any sense. At this point, I'm out of mental gymnastics to convince myself that this guy isn't just completely full of crap, and I'm really freaked out. I started trying to figure out a way to get out of the situation. I hoped that once he was done with the tour, we could go outside, even just for a minute, and I'd just leave. I'd been in some sketchy situations in the past, but luckily nothing so bad that they tried very hard to physically stop me when I walked away in a semi-public place. I just wasn't comfortable doing it inside the house. I knew this guy was so full of crap, but I had no idea how much worse it would actually get. I instinctively pretended to believe his bullcrap. He offered me a beer. I said no thanks because I had work in the morning. He said okay and cracked one for himself. Then he wanted to take the tour downstairs. I could see from the top of the stairs that the basement was the dark and creepy kind, with really small windows, so I refused. I asked if we could go back outside. He said after the tour. I tried to argue about going into the basement. I told him that I have a spider phobia, that I don't like basements, etc. All lies, but anything that wouldn't let him realize that he was what I was afraid of. He started to get agitated about my reluctance, so I figured it would be better to just let him show me the damn basement and then hopefully we could go outside, because I really didn't know what else to do. The basement was fairly unremarkable. Couch, TV, elliptical, until I noticed something that gave me chills. The house was probably built in the 1990s or late 80s at the absolute earliest, but I saw a door that looked just like the heavy foam-lined door to the cold storage room in my grandma's house, the kind that only opens from the outside. It was just a smaller version of the big metal doors on commercial walk-in fridges. It looked really out of place in this house. I would absolutely not go anywhere near that door. He He opened it and he told me it was their soundproof music studio. I looked inside from a few meters away. It did indeed look soundproof, and it was about the size of a bedroom, and I could see a few guitars and amps in it, mattress toppers on the walls. There was no drum kit or recording equipment that I could see. He insisted that I go inside to get a better look. He was standing outside the door and motioning for me to go inside. Holy crap, the alarm bells are really going off now. At this point, I realized that I could totally die here if I'm not careful, and I turned around to run up the stairs. He closed the door and followed me, asking what's wrong, acting like I'm being all unreasonable for not wanting to see a soundproof music studio. So I'm now realizing that this is a way sketchier situation than any of my ex's bullcrap, and I'm totally freaked out. At that point, my main objective was just getting out of the house. The front and back doors were both closed and locked, so if I tried to run, he'd be able to get me before I could get the locks open. The bathroom did not have a window. The house had a convoluted floor plan that I wasn't familiar with, and he was much bigger than I am. He was the tall, lanky type who could run fast even if they're out of shape and smoke a pack a day. I pretended that I was okay with hanging out with him in the hopes that he'd chill out a bit. We made small talk for a few minutes, he cracked another beer, and thankfully he calmed down. I desperately mentioned yet again that it was beautiful outside, and suggested we go and sit in the yard while we wait. He said no, and he started to get agitated that I wanted to leave already. I told him that I could stay, but I'd just really like to smoke a cigarette. He told me that we could smoke cigarettes inside, and pointed to a cereal bowl full of cigarette butts. Damn it! We sat down on the table and lit some cigarettes. As he was smoking, he had started rolling a joint, which he probably lit as soon as the cigarette was done. He offered me some and I said no thanks. He insisted, so I took the smallest puff I could. I'm a pretty seasoned weed smoker, but I pretended to cough excessively and told him I'm a novice, so that's more than enough for me. For a liar himself, he thankfully wasn't very good at picking up on the lies of others. After we smoked, he asked if I'd like to watch a movie until his bandmates get back. I told him that I was really looking forward to spending the day outside and suggested that we go for a walk or visit the park. Ideas that he did not like or appreciate. At this point, I was trying to keep as much distance as possible between us, but he stayed close enough to me that I could smell the beer on his breath. He grabbed me by the waist and I backed away and asked about the barbecue food to try and change the subject and make him think that I still believed what he was telling me. He started to get angry again and sternly reiterated that his bandmate should be home any minute, and my anxiety was absolutely through the roof. I tried to calm down again with generic small talk. Now, I don't know how I got so lucky, but the next thing that happened might have saved me. Simon went to the fridge to get another beer and pulled out an empty box. At this point, he's getting even more pissed off than before, so I went out on a limb and suggested we go get some more beer for the party because I was all out of ideas at this point. I was terrified that it would enrage him even more to suggest once again that we leave the house, but I had to try. Thankfully though, his eyes lit up with the possibility that I could actually be down to drink with him, and he agreed. As we were walking to the liquor store, I still didn't really have a plan because I was no longer comfortable just walking away from this freaking menace in this weirdly desolate suburb. But I was extremely relieved to be out of that house. I walked with him to the liquor store, and when we got there, I told him that I didn't need to go inside if he was just going to go grab some beer. He insisted that I go inside. At that point, I was so stressed and frazzled that I just went with him and hoped that a good opportunity to leave would arise. When we got inside the liquor store, he had asked what kind of beer I wanted. I reminded him that I had to work tomorrow and didn't want to drink much. He demanded to know what kind of beer I wanted, so I just named the first one that came to my mind. We went to pay. The cashier was kind of a jerk, so I didn't ask for help. I probably should have, but I panicked and didn't. I hoped that there might be somebody in the parking lot who might help me if I made a scene, but there was nobody. I really regretted not asking the liquor store guy for help, but I also remember the times that my ex told people I was crazy so they wouldn't take me seriously. Liquor store guy definitely seemed like he would have fell for that, so probably for the best I didn't expect him to help me. I had one last idea before I took my chances of just trying to run and scream. There was a drugstore across from the liquor store. I told Simon that I had to go buy a toothbrush or something that vaguely implied that I might stay over. He eagerly agreed to this, but tried to follow me in the store. I told him that you're not allowed to bring beer into the drugstore. I don't even know if that's even true. I really doubt it's any kind of law, but luckily this drunk douchebag believed it and agreed to wait outside. Now, my naive self thought that maybe I could just wander around in this drugstore for long enough and he would either get the hint or get sketched out or just be bored and leave. But no. I must have wandered around the store for at least half an hour, and this guy is still just standing there staring in the window. This creep didn't even have his phone out. Every time I checked if he was still there, he was just staring through the window looking for me. I didn't feel like I had anybody I could call in the city to come help me. The cops here don't usually take things like this very seriously, and the store workers looked like they were mostly just high school students, and I didn't want to drag them into this, so I didn't really feel like I had a lot of options. After being in there for so long, I was surprised that he didn't come in to see what was taking me so long. I thought maybe I could lose him in the aisles and sneak out of the store if he did come in, but no. I ended up hovering around the tills and waited until a big group of friendly-looking people were paying. I followed them out of the store and immediately told Simon to leave me alone and go home. I said it firmly and loudly enough to imply that I would make a scene if need be. Simon looked at the people getting in the car who were now pausing and looking at us because I had nearly yelled at him, and then he just turned around and left. It was bizarrely anticlimactic, which I was very thankful for. I ran to the train station, which was thankfully in a different direction than his house from the store, and I never heard from him again. When I got home, his app profile had either blocked me or had been deleted. Years later, after I had stopped compartmentalizing the whole thing, I wish I would have reported him or something. It bothers me to wonder if he had tried it again with someone else but made sure the fridge was stocked first. But at the time, I didn't think anybody would take me seriously. I was really embarrassed of my choices, and I just wanted to move on from the whole thing. Plus, all I really had was likely a fake first name, as well as a general idea of where the house was, which probably wasn't even his. I'll probably never know any more than I do now, and maybe that's for the best. To anyone listening to this, just please don't be afraid to meet new people or go out on dates. Be cautious, be curious, but you don't need to be fearful. This situation was not normal at all. To preface this, I'm currently 19 going on 20. Due to a vindictive teacher, she manipulated the grades so I'd have to repeat the 3rd grade because I called another student a brat for crying about wanting her mom. The context behind is irrelevant, but the rundown is this girl thought because her mom was a teacher she could cry her way into her mom's class. Her mom was a high school teacher and would almost always cry until she was allowed to go, and her poor mom would be distraught having to leave her class to go pick up her daughter because she wanted attention. I ended up snapping and telling the girl she's in the 3rd grade and way too old to be crying for her mom and also disrupting all the other students leaving. Probably harsh, but you could tell this girl was spoiled. On to the actual person in question. In August of 2023, I was in my junior year. I went to a trade school for graphic design. A sophomore named James had taken notice that I wouldn't be dropped off at our home school like he was. He offered to drive me home. I didn't know this kid well. I spoke to him a few times, but other than that, I wasn't buddy-buddy with him. I told him that my mom prefers to meet people before just letting me ride in a random person's car, especially a guy. With me being 18 at the time, I told him that if he got into a wreck, I would be responsible as I'm the adult in the car. After that, he didn't really bother me with anything. We still talked, and I could tell that he wasn't neurotypical. It wasn't until my junior year that things got creepy. We exchanged numbers because I would sometimes help him with homework that he didn't fully understand, and would give recommendations of horror channels on YouTube such as Reddit stories, creepypasta readings, or channels that cover disturbing videos like Hannah the Horrible, Nick Crowley, and Nexpo. Within a month, he found my home address. I never told him where I lived, and he got dropped off way earlier than me. The way the homeschool worked was that all the students on the west side of where I lived would go to one singular middle school and high school, while students from the east side would go to another high school. I never told this kid where I lived, let alone a rough area. I had started documenting everything at this point, no matter how big or small. The following months, I would fall asleep on the bus. He would tap my headphones, snap them on my ears, kick my legs, shake me, or call my phone just so I would talk to him. In April, he had asked me to go to prom with him, and I tried to tell him multiple times that I wasn't interested, and he tried to manipulate me, to which I just lied to him and told him that I had a family event that day. After that, I had said something to the principal of him harassing and shaming people to go to prom with them, and he gave me the most insincere apology ever. He worded it like he was forced to apologize. I got a phone call the next day from him asking if my sister drove a red car and worked at a coffee house. I quickly told him no and then blocked his number. I went to the administration, coupled with the fact that this kid would call to ask if I went to the Dollar General, went to work, or if I was at home. He told me that he had thoughts about killing his mom's boyfriend, how he wants to smash his teeth in, smacking his phone against the window, and try to manipulate me into calling while he was having a panic attack, and also ranted about how my math teacher needed to be gutted because she was overweight and that fat women are ugly and horrible vessels for producing babies. I'd like to also add that she's not overweight from a poor diet. She has a medical condition that caused a buildup of estrogen. The worst was when he lashed out in anger about him losing his AirPod case and aggressively stomping on his AirPods and literally foaming at the mouth. I went to the principal and liaison after this, only to be unable to talk, and they yelled at me for an hour about how I was being mean to a kid on the spectrum, and that my information, my mother's information, and my sister's information is public information. I started having a panic attack and called my mom. At this point, I was literally vomiting in the trash can of the conference room. My mother was pissed. My mother told me to call the sheriff's office after I get home. The sheriff actually went to this kid's house and told him to knock this crap off, or I had every right to file stalking and harassment charges. So far, I haven't seen him, and I still have his number blocked to this day. Hopefully I don't see this little bastard anymore at all. To James, if you see this post by some chance, stay the hell away from me and my sister. I hope your future general finds out about this crap. Yeah, that's right. This guy wants to be in the army. Should I see him again, I won't hesitate to press charges against him. I don't care if it ruins his life forever. He's a danger to those around him and potentially himself. I'm a teenage girl, and I had just come back from Oregon to California after having to go down there for a family emergency. Since it had just been the holidays, there weren't many hotels with open spots last minute, so my dad and I ended up staying at a motel. The motel was in a not so great area, but we were just gonna have to deal with it. After we checked in, my dad had parked the car in front of our hotel doors so we could unload and avoid the risk of a robbery. I went back outside to grab one more thing from the trunk, and I had noticed an older guy walking toward me. My dad came out to help, and when the guy saw him, he backed up, passed behind us, and started going up the stairs to his hotel. When we reached his balcony, he had began locking his door, and I realized that we had parked behind him. I went back inside and told my dad that the guy was trying to get to his car and we were parked in front of him. My dad went outside and parked the car not too far away. I thought this was what the guy had wanted to talk to me about earlier, but it seemed like he got nervous and just walked away. He locked his car, which kind of felt like a hint that he was trying to leave. However, after my dad parked the car and came back inside, I noticed the guy was still on his balcony, not coming down to leave. My dad went to the lobby to get some hot water, but he came back quickly when he then realized that the guy was still up there. He didn't want to leave me in the room by myself. We forgot about the guy for a while, but about 30 minutes later, I started the shower and I realized that I'd left my flip-flops in the car. I had asked my dad to watch me from the door as I went to go get them. I'm always paranoid about my surroundings, so it wasn't unusual for me to ask my dad to keep an eye on me. As I walked to the car, I noticed the guy had come outside and was watching me from the balcony. I looked away, but I could feel his eyes on me. I quickly grabbed my shoes and saw that my pepper spray was on the car door. I grabbed that too and then carried it with me just in case. I wanted the guy to see that I wasn't going to be an easy target if he was planning something. My dad wasn't in view because he was still inside the room, so the guy couldn't see him. But for some reason, my dad had decided to step outside, and when the guy saw him, he immediately turned around and started acting like he was just knocking on his door. I found this really strange, and I was just glad to make it back inside safely. A few hours later, I was lying in my bed and my dad was sleeping. I heard strange noises coming from behind the door. I was frightened, but I thought it was probably just other guests walking by. At some point, I fell asleep. The next morning, my dad and I walked to the lobby for breakfast, and I remembered the guy from the night before. I looked at where his car had been parked, and thankfully it was gone. I enjoyed my breakfast and then headed back home. I'm not really sure what to think about my story. I'm not sure if I'm just being paranoid or not, but my friends told me that they think the guy was being weird and that I should share my story to see other people's opinions about what was going on. I don't know if he was planning something or not. What do you guys think? My name is Clare, and this happened to me 2 months ago. I live in the UK, and I say this because of my wording. My sister and her husband went on holiday to celebrate their 10-year anniversary for a week. So as usual, I was asked to stay at their house the whole time to take care of their cat Tiffany, which I loved, and I enjoyed being on my own even though I still lived with my parents, which I also love and am grateful for. But sometimes you just need that personal time. Anyway, the stay was Sunday to Saturday, and the first few nights were fine, but Thursday night was a total 180. Now, the second I walk through the door, I lock and deadbolt it, and the garden doors are always locked, and the windows are only open an inch for about an hour. I had just finished my dinner and fed Tiffany when there was a knock at the front door. Now, my sister never even got anything delivered when I was staying there, so no one was due to come. I was in the hall when the door knocked again, and this time I looked through the peephole to see nothing. Now, like most of you, I also listen and watch horror stories, so at this point my mind was racing and I was getting a bit worried, but it was still light out, so I assumed it was just a salesperson, which is a popular thing in this neighborhood. And then I just went about my evening. Fast forward to a couple of hours later when it was about 9 p.m. when I decided to head upstairs to watch the television with Tiffany. But just as I had closed the living room door, I heard what sounded like my sister's wheelie bins falling hard in the garden path, which is where they were kept and taken out through the wooden garden door which led to the driveway. Call me paranoid, but I would rather wait until the morning to go check it out. So I brushed it off and headed to the kitchen to grab a drink and grab some snacks to take up with me along with treats for Tiffany, when suddenly I heard something else. Now for context, my sister's garden doors are full length and covered with blinds, which were turned to the slightest crack. So I could see out, but no one could see in, and I only had the opposite neighbor's sensor light as my guide. My eyes were fixed on the back doors, and what I saw made my blood run cold. The handle was moving up and down, first slowly and then started to speed up. When that failed, the banging started and this made me react. Now, my brother-in-law is a sports fanatic and he has equipment everywhere. I yanked the door open that was under the stairs by the kitchen door and found a golf club which I held tightly. I then called the police just when the knocking then came to the kitchen window right above the sink, but the handle on the doors was still going, which meant that there was more than one person outside. As soon as the police answered, I told them everything. At this point, the door handle stopped moving, but I heard the wheelie bins again. Only this time, it was like someone was jumping on them. I told the police the address, and the station is legit 3 minutes away. And just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, I had heard a thud coming from above me, and when I looked up, my screams rang out. A figure in all black was on the skylight window, which had no blinds on it. I didn't see their face, just them trying to open the window, and I had begged the police to hurry. I backed away towards the kitchen door when I heard sirens getting closer, and I watched as the figure ran over the roof, and all I heard was thuds and drops, and then nothing but sirens. A few seconds later, the sirens were loud and the light shined through the darkened house. My body was on the verge of collapse, but I was able to explain everything when they showed up. When they did a sweep, they had found both of my sister's wheelie bins on top of one another, clearly placed to create a platform high enough so they could climb onto the shed and onto the roof. And because I can only assume that there was two of them, this provided enough of a boost to get onto the roof in hopes of the skylight being left unlocked. This is what we all concluded anyway. The commotion of the police brought out the neighbors, and I had called my parents who came to be with me. None of the neighbors saw or heard anything, and the police just put it down to crime of an opportunity, as the house had no lights on. I like cozy settings, so no light or limit light I prefer even in my own house when I'm on my own. I was shaking, and my mom actually stayed with me that night and the next. I told my sister and brother-in-law the next morning, and my dad stayed the last night. It hasn't put me off staying there, but I'm just glad all the doors and windows were locked. But that Sunday, the police had called me to say that they had caught the two men who were linked to a few home invasions. So yeah, I'm just really grateful they didn't break in.